One time I went to see how some ladies were doing while they were preparing their tables on parade. Some of them, frankly, looked like death incarnate. I fought the urge to ask them where their cloaks and staffs were. Instead, I asked them questions about their tables and tried to compliment their work. I tried to be positive. That's a stretch for me, but I tried. They gave tired, withdrawn responses like, "The decorations aren't mine, I borrowed them," and other admissions like, "I don't really know how to do this. I'm having to look around at all the other tables because I don't know how the silverware is supposed to lay. This really isn't my thing." Here's my question. Why are we decorating tables that we don't even want to decorate? Is that supposed to honor God? I mean, let's examine this. We're doing something that we don't even want to do, usually at like 10 or 11 o'clock the night before an event, something that we had to squeeze or force into our schedule. I think quite the opposite is true. I think honestly that is the sacrifice of Cain.
How did Abel present his sacrifice unto the Lord? It was by faith. Moses did not write that Cain offered his sacrifice by faith, and no New Testament writer comments on the faith of Cain demonstrated by this offering. If Cain did not offer his gifts unto God by faith, then how did he worship? The opposite of faith is sight, that is, through human intuition. He worshipped according to sight, according to what his own senses and wisdom dictated would be an honorable gift unto the Lord. No doubt his produce was lovely to look upon. No doubt he labored over those crops until the harvest. No doubt he anticipated that all the hard work, time, and care he had spent on those offerings would be acceptable. This is clearly demonstrated by his reaction to the Lord's rejection of his sacrifice. Cain's offering was not rejected because it was not made in earnest. Instead, his offering was rejected because it was offered according to his own presumption and not by faith.
And how much of our church activities are just like this? The second concern for this portion today is sheep directing shepherds. I've heard that many churches either have committees or allow their congregations to vote on whatever activities and projects are suggested. This is a very democratic process, so no wonder American churches favor it. And I'm all for democracy in the White House. But when we compare this process to the Scriptures, there's really no basis for it. There's no biblical evidence, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, that Christ allowed his disciples to vote on their next destination. And the Israelites certainly didn't vote on the laws of the Torah that were handed to Moses. God handed down those directions to his Messiah and his servant Moses. And these directions were not up for debate. Think of the typical American lifestyle. Most of us spend our days working and caring for children when we're at home. How much time is allotted to seeking the mind and will of God? And this is not a criticism of people or a condemnation. We have to make a living. We have to clean our homes. We have to care for our children. But how is it that people who have not the time to pursue God's directions are the ones who ultimately decide what endeavors a church will undertake? Since when do sheep direct the shepherd? Who feeds who? Since when are sheep self-sufficient? Usually, if left to their own accord, they tend to be eaten by wolves, lost over the side of a bridge, or steamrolled by Mack trucks. They do not really have a good sense of direction, so they should not be trusted to lead. A man came to speak at my church. He cited the scenario in the Gospels about the men who lowered the infirm man through the roof and sat him before Jesus. Then he said, "Now, should an event like this happen in church today, most of the congregation would rise and complain that no one had voted on this man's untimely interruption of the service." In like manner, when churches don't help the least of these, the impression it gives the world is that God is a figment of our imagination, that He does not exist. That's because it suggests that God is no longer concerned about the least of these, that suddenly out of nowhere He's lost sight of the poor and the widows and the prisoners and the oppressed and the sick and the dying. It suggests that if He exists at all He cares about really is the preferred pastimes of human beings. And that suggestion contradicts every single word from all of His prophets. As He told His prophet Zechariah, "The Lord of heaven's army sent this message to me in reply. Say to all your people and to your priests, during the 70 years of exile, when you fasted and mourned in the summer and in early autumn, was it really for me that you were fasting? And even now in your holy festivals, aren't you eating and drinking just to please yourselves? Isn't this the same message that the Lord proclaimed through the prophets in years past when Jerusalem and the towns of Judah were bustling with people?" This message came to Zechariah from the Lord. "This is what the Lord of heaven's armies says. Judge fairly. Show mercy and kindness to one another. Do not oppress widows, orphans, foreigners, or the poor. And do not scheme against each other." God determines the validity of His praise based on our obedience to His commands, and many of His commands center around the concern for the poor, the invalid, and oppressed. It is in their deliverance that He is truly honored. It is in their deliverance that people see the faithfulness of God and the power of His grace. The direction of churches should therefore be placed solely in the hands of a few select men with knowledge of the Word and time allotted to seek His Spirit. And the last portion for this segment here is emptying the bowl. A pastor on a local radio station here relayed a story about a punch bowl at a family member's party. He said that the bowl was filled with ice-cold punch, but around the circumference of the bowl, women had placed many candles. What happened next was unprecedented in all of punch bowl history. The heat from the candles, so close to the freezing punch, created a conflict of interest. The heat from the candles suddenly caused the glass bowl to crack and punch flooded the tables. The pastor likened the glass bowl to the hypocrisy that confines the frozen chosen. He said our problem in churches today is that none of us are really hot enough to crack the glass. When a cup has been filled to the brim, it naturally overflows to others. But what good steward of fine wine would pour it into filthy cups? And how can cups be cleaned if the stains inside are completely ignored? They must be hollowed out, made empty, to make way for the coming flood of wine.